Today on episode 122 of Rail Talk, we have a potential new favorite in the Kentucky Derby futures. We look forward to a monster weekend of racing, one area where the cold weather has helped. It's jam-packed. And is the death of Illinois racing upon us? I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. Good to have you back, John, from a week in St. Lucia. Somehow, not a speck of tan on you.
No, the tan got froze off me, Joe. That's as soon as we touched down at JFK, it was like, boop, gone. 70-degree temperature difference. And it feels like it's negative 20 in my basement here, which is why I'm wearing the teeny weeny beanie of friend of the show, Lauren Carlisle. Thank you, Blackstock.
Shout out to Lauren. That's a snazzy beanie right there. You got to do a new production run, Lauren. I think a lot of people on this staff, all four of us actually, all five of us want a hat. So you can cut that part out.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on my.
You can cut that part. I thought you were done. What else did you have to say?
I was pretty much done. I guess I'm done. Okay, let's start the show.
The opinions expressed on Rail Talk are those of hosts Joe Bianca and John Green and do not reflect those of anybody we work with or work for. Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. Fasig-Tipton's first brick and mortar in-person sale is next week, February 9th. That's Monday, down in Lexington at Newtown Paddocks. It's the Kentucky Winter Mix Sale. Racing broodmare prospects, in-foal mares, short yearlings, all sorts of horses available for you to restock your racing stable and your breeding shed for 2026. It's the last breeding stock sale before most of the sheds open for the year. So this is a big opportunity to kind of, refresh your breeding stock. So that's an exciting opportunity. Lots of supplements to that sale as well. We talked about it a little bit last week on the show. So you can either watch that or you go to Fasig-Tipton.com, read about the supplements. There's been a couple of dozen of them, some pretty interesting ones too. So looking forward to that sale. And then after that, the Fasig February digital sale is February 19th through the 24th. Entries close next Tuesday, February 10th. So definitely get involved at digital.fasig-tipton.com. Starting to heat up with that sales calendar. Nobody else you'd rather do business with than the record-setting team at Fasig. All right, so this is the charmed life of Todd Pletcher. So a little bit after we recorded last week, the news broke that Ted Naffy, the presumptive Kentucky Derby favorite and champion 2-year-old colt of 2025, is off the Derby trail with bone bruising. So certainly a bummer. Like, he had been so head and shoulders above everybody else. I don't think he was going to be head and shoulders above the 3-year-old class necessarily, because I do think that this is a stacked 3-year-old division. As you know, I'm proven more right by that by the week, and this is going to be one of the toughest Derby contests we've ever done. But if you're Todd Pletcher and you lose a top Kentucky Derby contender, another one just blossoms that same week, and that's what Nearly did. Nearly is someone that we had mentioned before. We were talking about some of the early great 3-year-old performances of 2026. He had won 2 races at Gulfstream by blowout margins, gotten big figures. This was kind of the acid test for him in the Holy Bull on Saturday. And, we talked about it last week with Sam. Cannoneer looked kind of loose in that race, and Cannoneer ended up being a slight favorite. He was a Rail Talk citation, super expensive son of Into Mischief for Stone Street. But John Velasquez did not let Cannoneer get away. He took it to him basically from the jump, and they went fast early. They went 22-4, 45-4, 110-1. As you would expect, they came home slow, but visually, Nearly was doing it all by himself, mostly in the stretch and the last furlong or so. And I just thought, I knew the kind of talent that he had, but it's a different ball game when you're blowing out Florida bred allowance foes, and then you step up to grade 3 company and pretty much like kind of the first big marker on the Derby trail. And he passed that test with flying colors, got a 98 buyer. To me, he is narrowly now the horse to beat. We're less than 3 months away from the Derby. There's obviously a ton of racing that we're going to get to in our little preview segment. A lot of big 3-year-old races still to come. But, John, that was incredibly impressive. Another not this time, out of a mine shaft dam. You got to think he's going to be able to go 10 furlongs. Blown away by a horse that I thought pretty highly of going into the race.
Well, again, this is another step towards the first weekend in May, and Nearly, out of the entire group, Nearly was the one who graduated in my estimation and moved up. And when I looked at the past performances and the results, I was like, okay, they went up fast. They finished really slow. The last 2.5 furlongs was, finished up in 34 seconds, which is slow. But then I actually watched the race and I was like, okay, now, this is why you don't just look at things on paper. You got to actually watch the visual and watch the replay as well. I mean, nearly did everything you wanted him to do. He sat off it. He let the speed go out there, and then he just ground Cannonier into the ground, basically. And went by them like he was standing still. And the thing that was also visually impressive is like Johnny V passed all those horses, and then the last eighth of a mile, he basically just kind of wrapped up on him and was standing. If when you look when he hits the wire, Johnny V is actually standing up on the horse. And that's, what I was thinking as to why he went the last 16th of a mile in 7 and 2, because he just had it all in wraps and he wanted the horse to have a great experience. The main thing for me that impressed me about the horse is that he went 2 turns. And yes, he's a not this time. Yes, he's out of a mineshaft mare. There's distance in the female side of the pedigree as well. And you would say, okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, until a 3-year-old does that, until, he accomplishes winning a big race at, going 2 turns, you just don't know. You don't know if they're just an ultimately talented, supremely talented sprinter that's like life and death to get a mile. Well, this was 2 turns. It was a mile and 16th. And this was on, on the big stage.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I have to disagree that he sat off the speed. He's only like a half length back, I think, at most throughout the running. He really kind of took it to him. But I don't think that was that was necessarily because he had to be close. I think Johnny just saw the race like the rest of us saw it, that Cannonier, who was his main rival in the race, was loose on the lead on paper. And he was like, I got the best horse. Only way I can get beat is if I let Cannonier get loose and then not be able to reel him in. So he had to take it to him pretty early in that race. And as you mentioned, kicked away very, very strongly in the stretch. And, this is, again, like I'm just so stoked about this 3-year-old class, and we'll talk about it a little more, but there's just like, it goes so deep. And this is the kind of horse that I think in, a normal 3-year-old class, that kind of performance would make him like a prohibitive favorite among the individual entries in the next future pool. I don't think that's the case. Like, I think This is going to be the first of many very impressive prep races in the next month or two. And it's exciting because we kind of knew about him a little bit, as we mentioned, he'd had those big allowance and maiden wins at Gulfstream, but there's a lot of horses that I think are going to pop up and show themselves in the next month or two that we're not talking about now, that we haven't heard of yet. And as I mentioned, that's going to make the draft really interesting. What was funny about this, and I didn't bet on Saturday at all. I was away for my birthday, but I was looking at the payouts for that card, and the late pick 4 paid $18.85. The pick 5 paid $25.25. And the pick 6, the Rainbow 6, paid $37.18. Now, obviously, that's a jackpot wager. So, they weren't paying out most of the pool. But still, that's an incredibly chalky day at Gulfstream. And, that kind of leads me into something else that is pretty big news this week. And it's that NYRA has announced that Thursday, this Thursday, February 5th, is when the new restrictions on CAW betting are going to go into effect. So basically, the CAW players will be limited to the same volume of bets per second that every other bettor is limited to after 1 minute to post. Now, in New York, in NYRA races, typically races go off at least 2 minutes after the post time. So this is essentially 3 minutes where the CAWs are going to have to play by everybody else's rules. And, there's been a lot of back and forth on racing Twitter and the internets about this and how significant this is, but we're going to see. Like, this is, I don't want to argue about like how big of a deal this is, because it's certainly better than any other track, any other, company is doing. But there's still a lot of bets that can be made, 1,080 to be exact, by the CAWs, and there's no limit, as far as I can tell, on the dollar amount of those bets. So this is still can be a pool mover. The difference, I think, is going to be is that you're not going to see that huge crush of money in the last flash. So this will give players, like, theoretically a little bit more time to read and react and adjust their bets, maybe cancel, maybe put more money in. So I think it's definitely something, but again, this is going to be proven out and people are going to be on top of this, as they should be. the win bet restrictions that Naira has put in with 2 minutes to post have made a difference. They just have. You do not see the giant odds drops in the win pool at Naira that you see at these other tracks. You still do see them in the doubles and the exactas, and that's a huge problem. So now we're going to get more of a uniform blanket experiment for all the pools, and we're going to see if there's those big late odds swings. Because if there are, people are going to be rightfully pissed off and say, hey, this isn't enough. But if there aren't, then I hope that that'll set a standard for the rest of the industry and for Keeneland and for the Stronach Group and, all these other tracks across the country that handle big, big money that have yet to do basically anything to address this problem. I'm hopeful that this will be kind of the flag in the ground planted that says, hey, if you want to retain your customer, your regular middle class customer, this is the bare minimum that you should be doing for them. And I don't want to hear people whining about Naira not doing enough. Direct that energy at the people who aren't doing shit. How about that? Let's see how this works out. Maybe it'll be a game changer. Maybe it won't. But the people yelling at Naira all day about this, it just, you can't make the perfect the enemy of the good. This is a step in the right direction. We'll see whether or not it's going to be enough, John.
Yeah, and Joe, you're much more in tune with the wagering side of the industry than I am. So I'm glad to hear that you're seeing Naira's decision making as at least trying something new. That it gives you hope and it gives you pause to re-energize yourself towards betting on the Naira signal. I wonder how much quote unquote short-term loss or short-term pain they're going to endure by doing this with the CAWs. And to me, that is going to be more of an indicator as to whether or not other racetracks are going to follow suit, is how much is this going to cost us in the short run for a hopefully long run gain. And I think everyone else is kind of sitting back and saying, well, this may be a good idea or a bad idea, but we're going to let you, Naira, volunteer and do it first. And then hopefully if it works, then they'll jump in, because if this industry is nothing else, it's a copycat business.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think that there's at least one, I'm glad that there's at least one company that sort of gets what an existential crisis this is. Now, you can say, and you should say that, Naira has their hand in the till of the CAWs as well. They own part of one of the major wagering houses where they put their action in. And I to me, that is kind of the core issue here, is that not only are we trying to not chase away the whales and the giant bettors that are now propping up more and more of our handle total. You obviously have the companies that run the tracks who have interests in the CAW betting houses. That's a huge problem. I don't know that we're ever going to undo that. There's, you hear me talk about it. You hear people complaining about it on Twitter, and I think people should keep the pressure up. But I don't know that that's ever going to be unwound entirely. But until then, these are the steps that you can take to make things right or righter for the everyday bettor. And I'm curious to see how it goes. This is going to be an experiment. It's actually a great card on Friday at Aqueduct that we're going to talk about in a little bit because of the weather cancellations and the rescheduling. So this is a card that I would normally be. It might be the only card all winter that I bet at Aqueduct, but we're going to see. we're going to see how it works out. And I just think people need to take a breath, take a step back, see how it goes, and then, either it's not enough or it's good and the rest of the track should be following suit. This is, I don't want to prejudge. I don't want to get mad at the two people that are doing at least a little something ahead of time that it's not going to be enough, because I don't know. We're going to see, like I said, the win pool changes have made a big difference. Maybe, hopefully, this will make a difference in the other pools as well, because somebody's got to do something. And I'm glad that there's at least now going to be data and an experiment upon which to draw for hopefully the rest of the industry. Rail Talk is sponsored by Epic Insurance Brokers, one of the nation's top retail insurance brokers, providing expertise across key lines of insurance like property and casualty, employee benefits, and unique specialty insurance. Our guy, Chris Moore, is the head of Epic's equine specialty practice. You see him all over the place, sales, races. He has horses. He has brood mares. He lives and breathes this game. That's part of the reason we love him. And speaking of love, Valentine's Day is right around the corner. Love is in the air, and breeding sheds are going to be open soon. So the top 2 conversations taking place right now with Chris and the equine mortality team at Epic are: when is it best to insure my foals? And how do I use insurance to guarantee my no guarantee breeding contract? In many cases, Chris and the team can use the insurance products to secure a 2027 live foal on a no guarantee contract for less than the live foal stands and nurses contract. So pick up the phone and have a conversation. If you're wondering what the third place topic of conversation is, it's revisiting insurance values on your newly turned 3-year-old stock. So always remember, if your insurance policy is stale, it's probably your insurance relationship, not your policy. So shout out to Chris. He can get this conversation started for you. As you can tell, he's an expert in the field and just an all around great guy. So this is a busy time of year with a lot of moving parts on the insurance standpoint. Chris can help you get it all organized and illuminated and make sure you are not leaving money on the table. You can call him up or text him at 317-650-4519. And that leads us to this week's
Epic Performance of the Week.
It gets louder and louder every week. Yes. This week's Epic Performance of the Week is a stallion. Shout out to Not This Time. So we could do this pretty much every week for Not This Time, but man, it was pretty impressive on Saturday. Obviously, the Holy Bull winner, nearly crazy impressive, early favorite on the Derby Trail. But you also had On Time Girl, who was a blowout winner of the Forward Gal Stakes, another Kentucky Oaks contender. We have a couple of Not This Times at West Point. I'm sure John and DJ have a couple of Not This Times that they're excited about. I mean, you're getting left behind if you don't have one of those horses on the racetrack this year, because he's reached that upper echelon. But John, I would venture to say that he is the hottest stallion in America right now.
Smoking hot, there's no question about it. And you know what else is smoking hot is Chris Moore when he talks insurance.
Gets you going. Yeah, no, we love Chris. As we said, love is in the air. But yeah, I mean, Not This Time is he's the king of the stallion shed right now. No surprise that he is sold out for 2026, full book. Start making those calls to try to get in on 2027, because he's in that tier now where you're only going to take the best of the best mares to him. Was he 250K? I think up there, 250,000
something. And they're turning horses away right and left. So, a very appropriate, key horse and young stallion that we'll be talking about for another decade, hopefully.
And I know Dale Romans loves them too. Those checks coming in, those royalty checks from his training career. It's so interesting too, because he was, he only raced as a 2-year-old. And I remember at the time thinking, like, is the stallion market really going to react to a horse that is super well bred, but only, did not go on to race at 3? And they reacted, and his horses did the talking on the racetrack. So shout out to Not This Time. And he's one of those horses, honestly, like as a handicapper, if there's a Not This Time in the race, boop, I'm going to throw him right on the ticket. Like, it does not, I don't care who the trainer is. I don't care who the jockey is. I don't care what the speed figures are. If there's a Not This Time in the race, like, I got to use it in some capacity. So shout out to Not This Time. 2 graded stakes winners on Saturday. This week's Epic Performance of the Week. Rail Talk is sponsored by Tailor Made, the worldwide leader in thoroughbred sales, marketing, and horse care. Fasig-Tipton's sale next week, the winter mix sale, is coming up, and there was a pretty significant supplement to that sale. Ice Cream You Scream is a grade 1 winner, is being sold with a nomination to Not This Time. And, even forgetting who the mare was, nomination to Not This Time is worth a pretty penny in this business right now. So definitely go check that out. Tailor Made obviously does an incredible job at all the sales. We think of them as the leading yearling sales consignor, but they can do it all. Brood mares, in-foal mares, horses of racing age. Definitely worth going to TailorMadeFarm.com to learn all about all the new offerings coming up at the sales. And of course, the Stallion Barn as well, headed by Not This Time. A lot of other really nice horses underneath him on that roster, and those books are filling up. Not This Time is obviously already filled, but a lot of other nice horses at good value, good price points that you can look towards for some 2026 matings. And as I mentioned before, we have an Instagram that we like a lot. We obviously have Knicks Go represented with Ewing, who's coming back on February 16th. So, we're not just talking a lot of, John and DJ and West Point. We've invested a lot in these younger Tailor Made stallions. So you should definitely go check it out too. Go to tailormadefarm.com to learn more. So this is probably going to be the most stacked day of stacked weekend of racing, I should say, until that final weekend of Derby preps, which is usually the first Saturday in April. Keeneland opens and all that stuff. So that's kind of the start of spring and the big racing season. But this weekend is loaded, and it's in large part because of the cancellations at Aqueduct and Oaklawn from last week when the nationwide seemingly storm swept across and ruined everything. But this is it really sets up a tremendous smorgasbord of races, and we'll start with the Southwest card. This is always a tremendous card. I think it gets better every single year.
I agree.
And it's $1 million, 14 horses. It's really satisfying, honestly, John, because there's so many cards. I mean, so many, but some cards, and I think of the Pennsylvania Derby card mostly, where it's a bajillion dollars given away, and the fields are pretty mediocre, and the handle is extremely mediocre. And this is where Oaklawn, I think, really does it right. They put up a lot of money, mm-hmm. They get a lot of people through the gates, they take in a lot of handle, and they have full fields pretty much all winter. And this is an extremely, extremely interesting and deep renewal of the Southwest. To me, it starts with Decode. Now, he is going to be the wild card in this race. We made him the Rail Talk citation. He had that monster victory with a 99 buyer by 8 1/4 lengths first time out at Oaklawn. He's one of those horses that if he stretches out, he could be a complete freakazoid. But now he's got to go from 6 furlongs to 1 mile and a 16th. He drew inside. There's a bunch of other speed. Obviously, he's giving up a conditioning and experience edge to a lot of different horses. It sounds like Litmus Test is going to scratch and Butane's going to run. Yep. And you got the top two, the Mark Casse top two from the Smarty Jones and Strategic Risk and Silent Tactic, both very interesting. John, there's so many ways to go here. Take it away. Tell me what you see from the Southwest field.
Well, it's almost like you read my notes, because basically I have a big circle around number 2, and it says starts here, and that's exactly right, because Decode basically is going to have to, or Luis Saez riding for the first time on Decode is going to have to make a decision as soon as the gates open. That is, do I try to outbreak the rest of the field and get him nice and settled? And you would think Speightstown, if nothing else, is speed, and then hope to hold on and battle back and hold off some of these horses coming from off the pace, or do you try to sit chilly and see if the horse can relax a little bit, let other horses go out there? I personally think second race of his career, you don't necessarily want to take his biggest weapon away from him, especially being on the rail. But yeah, Joe, it is a stacked group. It's a grade 3, but it's $1 million. And I think basically what Oaklawn is doing is they've been kind of horses that normally go to the fairgrounds have been gravitating. Obviously, the turf horses don't, but the dirt horses have been gravitating to Oaklawn because of this 3-race series that goes on. And we enjoyed it last year with the gray called Sandman, who was also coming back, into a race on Saturday. But we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, the Southwest, I'm very excited about watching these horses in here, and probably going to pluck 1 or 2 of them off on the draft, because it is just, a stacked race top to bottom. And when you have, Mark's horses coming in at 9-2 and 20-1 after they finished first and second in the prep in the Smarty Jones, that just shows you how deep of a field it is from top to bottom.
Yeah, I'm a little interested, honestly, in Silent Tactic at 20-1. Yeah. I think that, as impressive as Strategic Risk was in that race, they came home pretty damn quick, and Silent Tactic had to come from pretty far back. And this is a race, as I mentioned, with a lot of speed on paper. So I can't imagine it not getting, the front runner's not getting a little weary late. So I don't think I'm going to get 20-1, but he's a horse that's very interesting to me. An improving sort. You got to think he's going to get better, being a Tacitus with racing experience. Mark has had an unbelievable meet at Oaklawn so far, 11 for 23 as at press time, as they say. But yeah, to me, it's like the most interesting horse maybe to run all weekend is Dakota, because he was so impressive, and because if he does stretch out and if he is able to withstand some pace pressure, he could be the best in a very, very impressive crop. I would not bet him with monopoly money in this race, because he's going to be 2-1, 9-5, something like that, just off of that figure. I'm sure the Baffert horse will take a bunch of money too. So I would not bet him here, but I do think that this is a very, very interesting kind of acid test for him, and whether he's the real deal in terms of a Derby trail horse, or if he's going to end up being like a superstar sprinter later this year. Also on Friday is the Martha Washington stake. There's a couple other stakes. There's the Bugler, there's the General MacArthur, but the Martha Washington is very interesting for the West Point team with Counting Stars. She finished 2025 incredibly impressively, winning 2 races at Oaklawn by open lengths within 13 days of each other. I mean, you don't even really see that often. And she's 3 for 4. She had the one stinker at Keeneland. Other than that, she's 3 for 4 with 3 very, very impressive victories. She was wide in that last race. Didn't matter. That being said, this is a step up for her. We got the untappable winner, Hit Parade for Brad Cox, just to her outside, although Brad Cox has had a little bit of a cold meet at Oaklawn so far. It's just 1 for 17 at this point. Other than that, towards the inside, Search Party, another horse for Mark Casse, just coming off a maiden win, but a very impressive maiden win over the track. Actually, the same day that Counting Stars won, homebred for Search Party. Maximum Offer is a little bit interesting for Kenny McPeak. So this isn't like a layup field, but I will say that, the prevailing thought about, internally, and we're going to talk about Super Corredora in a minute too, is that like, even though Super C is the champion, in our minds, Super Corredora and Counting Stars are kind of 1A and 1B in terms of Kentucky Oaks potential contenders. So she's going to have to step up a little bit more, as we get later in the season. But John, we love this filly, and this is going to be a tougher test for sure, but we think the sky is the limit, and so does Mark.
Well, and Counting Stars, really, if you cross a line through the Myrtlewood, as well you should, and look at the other 3 races, she's 3 for 3. She won by opening lengths in every single one of these races, and she's won on this dirt course twice, Joe. So, it's kind of like a home field advantage for Counting Stars. I was actually going to ask you that exact question of, gun to your head, who do you think is going to be the better prospect, for the Oaks? But you know what? We don't have to get to that yet, because thankfully they're both on their own respective paths. And hopefully, God willing, they'll meet either at Keeneland or at Churchill Downs that first weekend of May. But this is a great next step for Counting Stars. You look at a horse like Hit Parade and you say, okay, is bred up the wazoo, should definitely run and handle 2 turns. Has already won twice going 2 turns, once at Churchill Downs and once at the Fairgrounds. And to me, it's just a question of whether or not the horse can run. It's already run the back-to-back 81 buyers. Now, does it step up as it should, based on certain handicapping theories? Hit Parade ran 2 races or 3 races ago for maiden 50, Joe.
Yeah, and one with a 47
buyer. Actually took a step back from her initial race at Indiana. So we all can be kicking ourselves a little bit on that one, that we didn't claim a Street Sense filly out of Wedding Band, which, if you look at her pedigree, is just a really strong female family. So like on the boys' side, things are starting to really come together with the ladies. And oh, by the way, they also have to beat Search Party, the gun runner out of homebred of Tracy Farmers, who just seems to be relishing these additional distances, and I think is just absolutely clamoring for 9-10 furlongs.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, the thing I like about Counting Stars is how rateable she is. All 3 of those blowout wins, she sat like chilly. You know, she moved a little early last time, and then because she was on the outside, so I would like to see her get a little bit of cover down the backstretch in this race. But you know, I think that what we like about her too is that she's adaptable to the different pace scenarios. But I'm so excited to see her step up. She's a $150,000 2-year-old by Painter by Numbers. Her dam was a West Point horse, so it's kind of like a family affair there. So we're really stoked for that. And then we'll talk a little bit about Aqueduct as well. But I wanted to keep the Homer train rolling to talk about
as well as
Sandman. What?
As well it should. It's our show.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is our show. But I do think, like, beyond just us, people are excited to see Sandman back. You know, the most famous horse in the world. And he's got an allowance date on Saturday. It's fourth race, 2:32 p.m. Eastern post time. It's a 9-horse field. Certainly not a soft field, but nobody in there that I'm like, oh my God, like we'd be lucky to run second to this horse. So he drew the rail. He's been training awesome. He's been at Oaklawn for a while. We already know he likes the track. He ran great over the winter last year. He obviously had the Arkansas Derby win, but he also had the allowance win. He was second in the Southwest after a miserable trip, and then he was third in the Rebel. He tailed off, obviously, towards the end of last year, but I don't know. You think about it, like this was kind of like an old school horse for a while. He started his career in late June of his 2-year-old year and was basically racing straight through the end of August of his 3-year-old year. So he ran 12 times basically in 14 months. Like, I know that's in the history of the game, that's not a very taxing campaign, but in modern day, when you're running in grade 1 races, that's a lot of racing for a horse that, was an early developer. And I just felt like never was able to get that kind of reset. It's like the curse of running well early in your 3-year-old campaign. It's like, hey, we got to go to this race. We got to go to this race. We got to go to this race. We finally got the stop on him. He had a little minor arthroscopic procedure done. He's all good now. And I just, I personally obviously love him, but it's just going to be so great to have him back, John, regardless of what the result is for this race.
Well, I think the key is that he's training well, like you said. And the other key is that he got some letdown time and actually put on some weight and got a chance to develop, because we forget, sometimes how difficult it is to ship around and run at the highest of levels against the top horses, of his division. And other than, other than the Derby, which you can say, all right, the track just wasn't to his liking with the mud. And then the Jim Dandy, he ran kind of a stinker there. But otherwise, he ran a really heavy campaign, like you said, from early on as a 2-year-old. And we don't say this too often in this business, but the paparazzi was all over him all the time. I mean, there were people who were, the horse really couldn't get a chance to rest and relax. And no matter how much security and everything you put on, there's that hype, and there's people that are constantly walking up and down the shed row. And Mark Shedrow last year especially was like who's who in racing, as far as all the grade 1 races, grade 1 winners that he had, in the barn. But everyone was gravitating to Sandman for a lot of reasons, because he's a big gray horse. He had a great name. Metallica was all over him. Obviously, the Griffin Johnson effect, with the marketing, with America's Best Racing. The fact that he won the Arkansas Derby, you and I, talking about him on a regular basis. I mean, he really was in constantly in people's view, and really never had a chance to rest and relax. I'm not making an excuse for him. I'm just saying that once he did have a chance to let down because of the surgery, he had a chance to actually develop and put on some weight and grow and like calm his mind a little bit also, which for a Tappet is not an easy thing to do. So I'm very anxious to see how he does. He's coming to a track that he likes to train on. He's been training really well there. Every report I'm getting from Caden, Mark's assistant, is that the horse is really loving it there. And Mark doesn't ask his horses to breeze hard. I mean, he's not like a breeze hard, race hard kind of trainer. So the fact that Sandman had the bullet breeze December 27th, had a maintenance breeze on January 4th, January 11th came right back, was 2 of 39. And then last week, or a week and a half ago, excuse me, he was, went 5 furlongs in an easy 102. It was the third fastest of 11. I'm excited to see him get his 2026 campaign on. I think we're going to have a much better idea of exactly where he is. Was he the top horse and one of the Derby contenders, and one of the best of his class, or was he just kind of like an early developing horse that had a fortuitous career early on between the Southwest and the Rebel and the Arkansas Derby, and maybe he's just kind of a good solid useful horse, as we like to say. But I'm hoping he's going to be, back to his high level of racing and talent. If for no other reason, he's got a little brother that's kicking his ass right now.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes have been raised in the family, in the Distorted Music family, and I've said this before, but I would love to see him develop a little bit more tactical speed.
Yeah,
because I don't think it was necessarily that he was a total plotter. I think he ended up in a lot of races that had really fast paces, and that's kind of why he was so far back. I would love to see him kind of run like he did in that allowance win in December of 24, where he's like 2-3 lengths off the pace, sitting at the rail, sitting chilly, within striking distance. I would love to see that come around, because it's so hard to win these big races if you fall double-digit lengths out of it, and you need things to go your way up top. So I don't know that that's going to happen right out of the gate, but I'm hoping if this goes well, the next stop will likely be the Razorback for him at the end of February, and I would love to see him develop a little more tactical speed as the year goes on, especially in this race, because I don't see a lot of speed other than Track Phantom. Like, Track Phantom is probably going to be loose on the lead. I mean, maybe Echo again stretching out shows a little bit of speed, but Track Phantom is the horse to catch and beat in this race. And Sir Graylin has a shot as well from the outside. But this is going to be. I'm confident saying this is going to be the most watched allowance race of the year in horse racing nationwide. And you make a good point about his ability to reset, not just physically, but mentally as well. Because, as you said, he had a fan club, and there were like people around him all the time, throughout the first half of the year. And instead, after that, he got to like go back to Ocala and Mark's Farm, a really bucolic, pleasant environment with not a lot going on, and just kind of get to be a horse for a little while, as they say. So I think that is going to be big.
Yeah, Joe, I think Len and I are actually going to fly out just for this allowance race.
Wow.
Yeah, we may stay for the later card as well, but I think we're going to stick, because there's that filly that's coming off an Eclipse Championship that's going to be running that afternoon also. But we're really going for Sandman.
Wait. Nitrogen's running?
Nitrogen's running, Joe.
Oh, I thought she was going straight to the Apple Blossom.
No, she's training lights out.
Wow, we buried the lead here. I'm sorry.
That's all right, she's training lights out, and we entered her in the Biacoa. There's 6 other horses in the race. She's probably. I mean, obviously, again, Mark doesn't crank horses to be ready. First time off the bench, but. The idea, the game plan, Joe, with Nitrogen was that we were going to give her like 3 months off and ship her from California right back to Florida, and basically maybe make the Azeri, but most likely have the Apple Blossom as the most important race. And one thing about Nitrogen is that she no likey vacations. She is sound.
Unlike her owner,
who very much likey vacations. Yes, exactly. No, she absolutely positively was. And I say this literally, she was kicking down the walls of her stall because she was so bored. She was like, come on, I need to do. So Mark called us at the end of the year and was like, or the middle of December, basically, after the horse had been off for 5-6 weeks, and said, she's sound. She's mentally doing great. I know we had a tough campaign and a grind, but it hasn't affected her. And she's rejuvenated, regenerated, and is ready to start again. We said, okay, well, what's the plan? He said, well, I'm thinking the Azeri. Well, fast forward like 4 weeks, and he said she didn't lose any fitness. So we entered her with the idea that we would just kind of look and see what the race looked like. And this isn't the most important race of her 2026 campaign. It's obviously an important one because it's her first race back after winning the championship. But when we look back at her 2026 campaign, I don't think anyone's going to be like, oh yeah, well, you won the Biacoa, so of course you should be champion older mare, or oh no, you lost the Biacoa, so of course you should, so now you can't be. I think it's just a really good sequence and timing. Is she 100% fit and cranked? Nope. But, again, that's not Mark's style, and that's not the way that we look at it. But most importantly, now that, we talked about her, can I just show you one thing that one of our listeners and probably our number one fan, or 1 and 1A, this is a portrait of Nitrogen by number one fan Amanda, Mandalay 11.
Shout out to Mandalay.
Mandalay 117. Who hand drew that Nitrogen photo, a Nitrogen picture off of a photo, and really captures just the intelligence of Nitrogen and her look and her, demeanor of being a kind horse when she's not campaigning. But just, I was so touched by this. And I'm going to hang it here in the room down here in the studio, just as a constant reminder of not only how great Nitrogen is, but more importantly, how wonderful and how giving our fans are. And I know you mentioned it last week, about how nice it is when people come up and say, I really like the show. You're carrying John's ass, whatever it is, that they say to you. But that's what fuels me, Joe, quite frankly, is that when we find good people in the industry, whether it's Amanda or Skip or anyone that in
staff.
Between staff, of course, staff. Well,
Staff mattered, please.
And just the fact that they appreciate the energy and the influence and the information that we give out on a week to week basis. And when we get things like this, it means the world to me. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, shout out to Amanda. That's beautiful. That is really nice. She could sell that for a lot of money. Instead, she sent it to you. What do you get the man who has everything? And it's a beautiful little portrait of Nitrogen.
Or a beanie,
Shout out to Amanda. And that reminds me, I'm wearing Skip's shirt.
Yeah, I love that. I llove that shirt.
I got the NDSU shirt that Skip sent me, and I Skip, shout out to you. But this is one of my favorite T-shirts. So, and this is just kind of a long plea for you to send us free stuff.
Exactly.
But it's kind of what it turned into. But yeah, no, I totally agree with what John said.
It turned into the plea for free shit because somebody didn't do their homework and see that Nitrogen was running this weekend.
All right, bad job by me. Okay, there's a lot going on this weekend, John. That's what this whole.
I got a lot of horses I got to pay attention to. We got this horse, we got that horse, we got this one running in the Oaks Prep, we got this one running.
You're like fucking waiting to spring that on me too. You're like, we might go just for Sandman. Oh yeah, and okay, sorry. I thought she was going to run the Apple Blossom. As you said, this was not like the plan all along. Otherwise, I would have known that.
Right.
But yes, bad job by me. I should have noticed that of the 14,000 grade stakes going on this weekend, that Nitrogen is the A-lister, and we're excited to have her back. Obviously, she's drawn outside. To me, she's 4 to 5 morning line. She's probably gonna be 1 to 5 in that race. So that's very exciting, and I wish you guys luck with Sandman and Nitrogen on Saturday.
Thank you. And we have misinformation in the third race also.
Okay, enough. Try to catch me on all these fucking DJ horses, and Jesus. I'm a very good plugger of DJ horses. This time I dropped the ball. All right, nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect or whatever that.
Nobody's perfect is the phrase. Other things I want to mention real quick. Super Corredora is going to run Sunday in the Las Vergenas Stakes. They have not drawn the card as of this recording time. I think it's probably going to be a short field, but it's going to be a rematch. I think between her and Explora. So the 1-2 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly is going to run in a $100,000 stake on Sunday at Santa Anita, and it's probably like the 4th most interesting race of the weekend, which is tells you all that's going on. And the Withers card I think is really interesting and worth looking at Aqueduct, as I mentioned. Withers is a really nice field. It's a 1 1/8 miles, so this is like the first 9 furlong test of any 3-year-old prep so far. Schoolyard Superman, really interesting for Chad Brown, is another horse from his barn. Otinho to his outside. Those are probably the two to beat, but a very, very nice card at Aqueduct to kick off kind of the new CAW restrictions and see how that works out. And as I mentioned, the Sam Davis is also Saturday at Tampa. Have not drawn the card yet as we're recording, but man, this is and for the first weekend in February, to have this much to talk about from a racing standpoint, John, we are blessed.
We are, and the most important thing is Nitrogen.
Okay, the Rail Talk is sponsored by Nitrogen.
fueled by nitrogen.
That's good. I like that. Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Tax day is right around the corner. You want to get on Len's calendar, and you want to do it soon. Obviously, Len and DJ own over 200 horses. They won over 2,600 races. They've got a champion coming back this Saturday, as John reminded me, and I'm sure Len will give me the business about not knowing that, but Len and the Green Group have close to 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make them money and save them taxes. And as always, there's a special exclusive offer for listeners of Rail Talk. That means there's a complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation where Len guarantees he will find you value. And all you got to do is call up that number. What's that number, Michael Agresta?
732-634-5100. Green Group.
Or go to greenco.com and do it soon. As I mentioned, tax day is right around the corner. Len's schedule is filling up with people who want him to look out for them the way he's looked out for so many people in this business. No matter what kind of participant you are in the racing industry, Len he's got the expertise, he's got the goods, and he'll help you out. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it from, our fearless leader at West Point. Big weekend for the West Point family. Super Corredora coming back, Counting Stars, Sandman, et cetera, et cetera. Terry and Len, can't think of a better combination in this business. Let Terry Finley tell you all about how the Len and the Green Group have helped him.
Always been a huge fan of Len Green. I've known him for probably 35 years. I remember when I first started, I tracked him down because he was a significant player then, and that was 34 years ago. He took my call 34 years ago, and we spent a day at the races. He actually won a race with a horse by the name of Do It With Style, who was his first Grade 1 winner. And the interesting thing is he won a stake. At that time, it was probably Keystone, and they didn't have a crop with the jock. He's just a gem of a man. There's a sweetness to him. Obviously the integrity part, and he's a person that you'd love to go to dinner with, in addition to being whip smart on all things business. And don't ever try to trip him up with a tax issue, because you ain't doing it, brother. You ain't doing it. And anyway, he's just a testament to somebody who has lived a life and continues to live a life that is well lived and with honor and integrity and joy and passion. They've been down every road you can be down in the thoroughbred horse business as owners and breeders. They've been down it, and I think ultimately that impact and that advantage really comes out in the client's favor. And that's what they really like to do. They like to own good horses, and they like to do good work on their taxes. And I think that's a very, very, it's a good and impactful combination for both a group of people that work at the Green Group and Len and John and their family on the horse ownership side.
Thank you, Terry. And I also want to shout out, Len does a great job. It's kind of more synergy with West Point. Our CFO, Lindsay, he jumps on and does like a little Zoom with her, with some of our partners sometimes, to talk about like the tax benefits of owning horses. So that's a perk of owning with West Point. But you could experience all the perks of working with the Green Group if you just call them up at 732-634-5100 or go to greenco.com. There is nobody, bar none, that you want to be working with and that you want in charge of your accounting needs and your tax returns. If you're a participant in racing, then Len and the Green Group, they do an unbelievable job, and best of luck to the whole team this weekend at Oaklawn. Wanted to touch on this before we go. It's possible, it might even be probable that the last thoroughbred horse race has been run in Illinois, which is pretty sad and pretty devastating, especially considering 5 years ago, they were running at Arlington Park. They had the Arlington Million card still at Arlington Park. And now we're less than 5 years later, and it's possible that Illinois racing is completely kaput. And obviously, the first domino to fall in this was Churchill Downs' shameful closing of Arlington Park. allegedly because they didn't want it to compete with some shitty casino they had 10 miles away. It was, to me, the most inexcusable closing of a racetrack that we've had so far in America, especially when you consider they haven't built one goddamn brick of development on that site in the last 5 years. There's a back and forth going on between the Bears, the Chicago Bears, who were supposed to build a new stadium there, and the city of Arlington Heights, and they still have not come to an agreement. It seems like Arlington Heights is being a little bit unreasonable based off what I've seen, but that's neither here nor there. It is just so galling to me that Churchill closed one of the jewels of American racing that was not hurting, by the way. Like, the racing product, yes, was not as great as it once was. But I told this story, like, I went out there in July 2021 just so I could see Arlington before it closed down. I was there on a shitty, rainy Saturday with no big races, and they had like 12,000 people there. And Arlington was in the middle of freaking nowhere. Yeah. So it's not like people stumbled upon it. 12,000 people went out of their way to go on a rainy Saturday to go see racing at Arlington Park. And it really still, and I know this is like a fraction of what the people in Illinois feel, but it really just still gets under my skin and drives me nuts that Arlington Park was closed to do nothing with that land for at least 5 years. But just get past that for a second. Hawthorne theoretically could have picked up some of the slack of Illinois racing. Obviously, Hawthorne not nearly as picturesque of a racetrack. The racing quality is not nearly as good, but there had to be some kind of footprint going forward in Illinois racing. And now it appears that there will not be, or there most likely will not be, because the owners, they're the operators of Hawthorne, their license has been suspended. And I'm reading from the TDN story. Shout out to Dan Ross. He says, the extent of Hawthorne Racecourse's financial troubles, and with it, the enormous ramifications for industry stakeholders in the state, were made glaringly clear during Wednesday's Illinois Racing Board meeting. The Racing Board suspended the operating license of Suburban Downs Incorporated, which manages Hawthorne's harness meet, for, quote, failure to provide documentation demonstrating its financial integrity and proof that they can meet the minimum standards as outlined in state law. According to representatives from the Illinois Harness Horsemen's Association who attended Wednesday's meeting, Hawthorne, which is owned and operated by the Carey family, is responsible for more than $580,000 in bounced checks between some 66 individuals in recent months. With the 2026 Thoroughbred meet scheduled to begin March 29th, representatives from the Illinois Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association detailed both the sense of urgency with which they are seeking assurances from Hawthorne the meet can go ahead, as well as the consequences if it doesn't. The ITHA alone is apparently owed around $600,000 from Hawthorne for payments dating back 7 months. And at this meeting, the owners of Hawthorne did not bother to send the president and general manager to provide the updates. Tim Carey, who is the president and general manager, was scheduled to come. He pulled out before the meeting, and in his place, they sent Hawthorne's assistant general manager, John Walsh, who did not have good answers. And even like there weren't even really any probing questions from what I can see. And it's just like, this is staggering to me because the board and the owners of Hawthorne are not seeming to treat this with the urgency that it requires. It seems like the only people who realize how or care how dire this situation is are the Illinois horsemen. And I just feel so bad for them because they have been jerked around for years. Like I said, going back to the Arlington closure and Churchill's management of that. These are people that obviously have roots in Illinois racing. They don't want to pick up and leave and go to, Canterbury or Indiana or wherever. They want to try to make it work in Illinois, which has a pretty strong history of racing in the state, and they're completely being hung out to dry. This is an incredibly sad situation, and I think, kind of emblematic of the mismanagement of so many entities in this business. And, it's just another kind of like strike that makes me think long term, we're just going to be racing in Kentucky and Arkansas and New York. And I don't want that to be the case. I do think that racing needs to have a touch point for people all across the country to find it and to develop new fans and new bettors. But Jesus Christ, like when you have these kind of people in charge, John, how could you have any faith that that's going to be the case?
Well, and Joe, I think, you pointed to a couple of racetracks closing and that being the final bricks on the wall of not having racing in Illinois. I mean, I would even go back further than that, because for a lot of these, what I would call middle tier racetracks, the problem is that it's kind of been business as usual. On the racing side, on the management side, on the horseman side, and basically they've been kind of whistling past the graveyard. And the rest of the universe has been progressing forward, and there have been different alternatives now as far as where to bet your hard-earned money, and it's been easier to bet your hard-earned money. And for a lot of jurisdictions, they were just kind of left in the dust. And I think, unfortunately, this is a situation where, they were kind of hoping that things were going to get better, and maybe they made some changes. I'd be lying if I said I was up to speed on everything going on in Illinois racing. But even down to, like, say what you want about First and Stronach. When they knew that they were closing down the Maryland racetrack, Pimlico, they did something that was really smart, and that is they leased the Pimlico, the Preakness, the Preakness. I don't know why I always call it the Pimlico. They leased the Preakness, and were able to derive money for them, but they were able to derive money. Well, one thing about Illinois racing, especially at Arlington, were these $1 million turf races that were out there. And, there are turf courses, especially in the spring and summertime, where a lot of those racetracks would love to have, brought over the Secretariat and the Beverly D. And they did, but it wasn't, I don't think it was to the benefit of the Illinois horsemen. I think it was, they just kind of, basically adopted those racetracks and took them over, and now are running them at Colonial Downs and other, points in that area. So, to me, it was just, it was a lack of foresight. It was a little bit of wishing that things would continue to amble on, and hey, nothing to see here. We'll just keep moving forward. But also, and again, this isn't a criticism, but like, I can't train a horse. I couldn't go out there and tell you all the things that we should do on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis in order to get a horse ready to campaign. But my skill set, my acumen is in business, and I know how to negotiate deals. I know how to see patterns. I know it, and I'm thankful for that. It's impossible to have trainers to be expected to run racetracks or to be able to negotiate deals on behalf of their group and constituents. It's just not a fair deal. And business has accelerated so quickly now that maybe 30 years ago, trainers could do this. They could do both. They could keep a foot in both camp of training a horse and also, helping to get fair deals for horsemen, or have foresight to be able to avoid some of these situations. But that's not the case anymore. And it's really an unfair ask, I think, for these horsemen's groups to be expected to come up with answers and come up with strategies that are going to help. It's not fair. It's like asking anybody to speak a different language.
Yeah, I mean, but it seems like they're trying. Like,
yeah,
Chris
absolutely.
Block, who's the president of the ICHA, is like, seems like from this article that he's trying to work with the IRB and the Hawthorne owners to try to come up with a solution. And if this gets its way to Chris Block, like, you want to come on the show and talk about this in greater detail, because obviously more than we do.
Yeah.
Then we'd love to have you, like, just to shine light on this, because we don't want another state to go away. But just reading some of the quotes, like, I'll go back to the story. So basically, the assistant general manager was kind of alluding to the idea that someone who's interested in Illinois racing is going to come and help rejuvenate it. And it sounded very familiar when he goes, the quote is, "Whatever's going to happen is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks." What other guy is always like, if you just wait a couple of weeks, just wait 2-3 weeks, great healthcare plan, you're going to see it all. It's going to be great. Just 2-3 weeks, like infrastructure week, you're going to have all these great plans, 2-3 weeks. Sometimes, I think often that does not come to fruition. And he says, we will have something in place by that date, ... or we don't. because February 16th is kind of the turning point, because the facility needs to switch over operations from harness to thoroughbreds. So they need to turn over the racetrack. And if they don't do it by that point, then essentially there's going to be no 2026 thoroughbred meet at Hawthorne. So he says, if we don't turn over the track, I'm sure Tim, the general manager who didn't bother showing up to this meeting, will contact the board and just say where he is. But I just know things have to be done by February 16th. They will be done. They have to be done. Sounds like wishful thinking to me. And, you know, I kind of feel bad for this guy, because I feel like he was kind of thrown to the wolves. Like, he's the assistant. Like, he's not the boss of this company. Like, he's just kind of saying what he needs to say. It's very frustrating and very sad that, you know, you have so many either incompetent or disinterested or both people who are in charge of running racetracks in this country. And I pray he's right, that there is somebody who wants to step in and kind of make this right for the Illinois horsemen. I do not believe it, just based on what I've read, but obviously I'm not as plugged in as certain people. But yeah, February 16th is the key date where they turn over the harness track to become the thoroughbred track. And hopefully it's you know, it happens, because if not, you know, like I said, and like others have said, there's a good possibility there will be no more thoroughbred racing in Illinois less than 5 years after Arlington Park was still in its heyday. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 122 of Rail Talk. Thank you to my co-host, John Green. Great to have you back in the saddle. Huge weekend of racing coming up. Best of luck to the home teams and all the listeners and viewers if you're betting this weekend. Thanks again to Amanda for sending that beautiful portrait to John of Nitrogen, who I'm told is running this weekend. Cannot confirm, but that's the word on the street. So shout out to our producer, Patty Wolf, and our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Love all you guys. Love all y'all for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, YouTube, wherever you get your pods. We're approaching like a bajillion views, I think, on YouTube. So every view helps us to cross that bajillion marker. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.